Chariots were the tanks of the ancient world. Made of iron or wood, they were pulled by one or two horses and were the most feared and powerful weapons of the day. Some chariots even had razor-sharp knives extending from the wheels, designed to mutilate helpless foot soldiers. The Canaanite army had 900 iron chariots. Israel was not powerful enough to defeat such an invincible army. Therefore, Jabin and Sisera had no trouble oppressing the people until a faithful woman named Deborah called upon God. Hey y'all, it's me, Cindy Fessler, your fellow Christian warrior, here to help you know more so you can share more and grow more of God's kingdom. So if you haven't done so already, you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. Take a look at the history of what was going on in these times when the Iron Chariot situation takes place. We've got the it's after the death of Joshua. So I'm taking this from enduringword.com, which is an awesome resource. It's very, very detailed. And he says, now after the death of Joshua, in this period of the judges, Israel lost a critical next link in its godly leadership. Moses was the great leader used by God to bring them out of Egypt. Joshua was Moses' assistant and the great leader used by God to bring them into the land of promise. But Joshua appointed no leader after him to guide the whole nation. They were in a critical place where they had to trust God more intensely than ever before. So God gives a wonderful human leaders to his work here on earth, and it's always difficult for God's people when they lose those human leaders. They pass from the scene sometimes, right? So in this situation, we may live in the past wishing that leader was still here with us. But after the death of Joshua, during this period of judges, which lasted about 340 years, there was no standing office of national leadership. Israel had no king, no president, and no prime minister on earth, only God in heaven. Yet at the necessary and appropriate times, God brought forth a leader for the nation. For the most part, these leaders would rise up, do his or her job, and then return to their obscurity. This required that the people of Israel maintain a real, abiding trust in God. These national deliverers were not elected. They didn't come to leadership through royal succession. They were there, they were gifted by God for leadership in their times, and the people of God recognized and respected that gifting. When this book uses the term judge, it does not mean someone who sits in a court and decides a legal issue, right? The Hebrew word shafat has more the idea of a heroic leader, which is really cool. The Hebrew word shafatim is derived from the word meaning to put it right, and so to rule. And this is exactly what these men and women did. So the people of Israel had great obstacles. They were surrounded by people who lived in the most terrible immorality and idolatry, making a constant temptation to them to do these same sins, right? The idolatrous lives of the Canaanites who lived around them, who lived around Israel, were focused mainly on three things: money, sex, and having a relationship with God on their terms instead of on God's terms. So the book of Judges shows us a time when it's sometimes confusing and difficult and dark. For this reason, many neglect the judges and they don't even read it, right? They regard this period of time as the dark ages of Israel's history. Yet, if we neglect this book, we neglect a wonderful account of the love and graciousness of God and how he lovingly corrects his people. What we find out about man in Judges is depressing. But what we find out about God in Judges is wonderful. On the human side, it is a story of disobedience and disaster. On the divine side, of continued direction and deliverance. There is, however, one light in which the whole book may be viewed, which renders it invaluable. It is a most remarkable history of the long suffering of God towards Israelites, in which we find the most signal instances of his justice and mercy alternately displayed. The people sinned and were punished. They repented and found mercy. Something of this kind we meet with on every page, and these things are written for our warning. None should presume, for God is just. None need despair, for God is merciful. Okay, so carrying on with this subject of contradictions in the Bible because it is important, right? A lot of detractors, people that don't believe that we're going to run into, they're going to bring up these contradictions in the Bible. And I must say, this is one that has just stuck with me. I read this about this supposed contradiction years ago, and this really actually was one of the inspirations for doing these videos, because it just, I don't know, it's one that just bothers me, and it's so easily dispelled. So let's get into it. Okay, so there's these verses in Judges, right? And some apparently seem to say that in one case, Judah, the tribe of Judah, the people of Judah, were unable to drive out this enemy because they had these iron chariots. And then in another passage, also in Judges, it says that they could drive them out. Suddenly they can, right? So there's a contradiction, supposedly, where they can drive them out and then they can't. But the underlying contradiction that you'll see people bring out is, if God was on the side of the land of Judah, the people of Judah, they could do anything. Why were these iron chariots too hard for God? Clearly, he's not omniscient or omnipotent. I'm sorry. That's the one that really bothers me, that the iron chariots were just too hard for God. So, you know, we as Christians can't say he's all powerful because he was stuck by the iron chariots. No, he was not. So let's take a look at the verses that say that they could not drive out the iron chariots. So let's look at the King James Version. It's passage Judges 1:19. And the Lord was with Judah, and he drove out the inhabitants of the mountain, but could not drive out the inhabitants of the valley, because they had chariots of iron. There it is. So they couldn't drive them out, right? They were successful in the mountains, not so successful in the valley, because those people had these devastating iron chariots. All right, so now let's take a look at the passage that supposedly contradicts this. So yes, they can drive out the iron chariots. In Judges 4:13 through 16, we see Sisera called together all his chariots, 900 iron chariots. So this is the enemy of Judah, right? He's got these chariots, and all the people who were with him, from Harosheth Hagoyim to the river Kishon. So the enemy is gathering his troops together. In 14, Deborah said to Barak, "Arise, for this is the day in which the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Behold, the Lord has gone out before you." So Barak, he's the leader of the Judah army. He went out. He went down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him. And the Lord routed Sisera, just took care of that enemy and all his chariots and all his army with the edge of the sword before Barak, and Sisera alighted from his chariot and fled away on foot. So before Barak, he's seeing this whole thing. Sisera runs away. Okay, so the guy with all the chariots just runs away. But Barak pursued the chariots and the army as far as Harosheth Hagoyim, and all the army of Sisera fell by the edge of the sword. Not even one was left. So again, two contradictions here. The obvious one, they could drive out the chariots. The other passage says they could. And more importantly, in the first passage, the chariots were too powerful for God. He just couldn't handle it. So let's dig into this, because it's kind of silly. The critic has searched diligently for an impressing Bible contradiction, and they really, at this point, they think they found one, right? In the beginning so we need to give a little context here, the history. Shortly after Joshua's passing is when this takes place, right? So Israelites have got these conflicts with neighboring countries. So they're able to take hold of the promised land that's in the hill country, but not in the valley, because of these chariots. So ask yourself, though, why weren't they able to take the valley? What was too big for them? Who wasn't able? God or the people of Judah? Well, we know the answer, right? It was the people of Judah that couldn't do it. God can do anything. So in the passage in Judges 1:19, like I said, I took it from the King James because it's the most literal. In the King James Version, it seems as if God was unable to drive out the inhabitants of the valley because they had these iron chariots. However, the King James translators purposely did not use the capital letter H for he. They clearly pointed to Judah. They're talking about the people of Judah when they say he. They're not talking about God here. And rightly so, as this information is given in a series of military operations about the tribe of Judah. And so, sorry, the he in this passage is the tribe of Judah, not God, okay? So let's talk about Barak's later victory. So, well, one may ask, how is it possible then later the Israeli army, the army of Judah, consisting of merely infantry, could prevail over an army with 900 iron chariots? Oh, how is it possible? So Barak gathered his soldiers on Mount Tabor near the river Kishon, as Deborah ordered him to. And during the battle, the river became a wild stream of water. We see this in Judges 5:21. That made it impossible for these Canaanites under Sisera to use their iron chariots properly. They had to leave them, couldn't even use them because of the water. Great victory for Barak and his army. Ta-da! No Bible contradiction. So the reason the men of Judah were successful because they had full confidence in God at this point. When they're able to be successful is when they have confidence, they have trust in God. It's not the Lord that falls short, it's the people. So the men of Judah could drive out the inhabitants of the mountain. They couldn't drive out the inhabitants of valley because they had chariots of iron. Their faith just only went so far. They were afraid. They were lazy. They didn't want to face these guys. They had too much confidence in themselves and not in confidence in God alone. They believed one promise of God, but they didn't believe the other. So we need to kind of be careful of that in our own lives, right? Not to be pickers and choosers of God's promises. So they didn't have faith. So there's really not a conflict here at all. So appreciate you guys going through that one. Once again, I think you will run into it. It's all over for some reason, this seems to be a contradiction. It's on the internet. And now you have something to defend it, to defend your faith. Well, hey guys, thanks so much for watching this video. I am so excited that you stuck to it to the end, and I appreciate that. And please do smack that subscribe button. Check out the next video.